Good afternoon. Before we have our lunch, we're going to have our mayor speak, and I would like to introduce our mayor. Catherine Elizabeth Pugh was sworn in as the 50th mayor of the city of Baltimore on December the 6th, 2016. She has been a public servant for more than 15 years. She was elected to the Baltimore City Council in 1999. In 2005, she was appointed to the House of Delegates of the Maryland General Assembly. She served for 1 year before running for a Senate seat in 2006. Her ability to negotiate and her bipartisan approach catapulted her into various leadership positions in the Maryland Senate, including serving as Majority Leader. Mayor Pugh is the founder of the Baltimore Design School, a public school for 6th through 12th graders. She is the founder of the Baltimore Marathon, which is in its 17th year and has over a $30 million impact on our city. She serves on several boards and is a former president of the National Black Caucus of State Legislators. Mayor Pugh is a successful businesswoman, serving as president of C.E. Pugh and Company, a marketing and public relations firm. She has worked as a banker, a business developer, dean and director of Strayer Business College, special editor for the Baltimore Sun newspaper, and a television and radio news reporter and talk show host. She is the author of a series of children's books and an inspiration book of poetry. Mayor Pugh's all-inclusive vision is one for each of Baltimore's neighborhoods to be equally balanced. She is seeking money from the state and from public-private partnerships to raise the number of summer jobs for Baltimore students. She is focused on youth development, training and employment, strategic partnerships, neighborhood beautification, mental and behavioral health services, community violence reduction, and building informed communities. She does not take the job of running our city lightly. As she rarely sleeps, she is on call 24/7. As I have heard many people say in the nearly 2 years that she has been our mayor, she gets it. Mayor Pugh holds an MBA from Morgan State University and has received qualification from the University of California as an economic development specialist. She has been recognized for her leadership by numerous local and national organizations. Please welcome Baltimore Mayor Pugh to our Mid-Atlantic Sponsors 2000 Annual Trustee Conference.
Let's give Joan a big round of applause. This is my friend. Y'all really got some business. This is my friend in government and my friend for many years. We've worked together over the years, and Joan will probably tell you that during our Board of Estimates meetings, we have a Board of Estimates meeting, that's our spending board, once a week. And I think we have the record in terms of time it takes to get things done. Because we don't waste time. One of the things that I agreed to do early on, because I think partnerships are really important, is that if Joan doesn't understand what's going on and the president doesn't understand what's going on, then you don't bring it to the board. Because I'm not going to sit there and defend agencies that have not explained to our comptroller and to our president and city council what's going on. And as a result of that, we have forged a partnership that I believe will make a difference in the future of our city. Eileen, let me have you come up for a second. Let me just say, I have had the privilege of speaking before this group and others because I forged a relationship many years ago around pension funds and pension fund investment. And so I wanted to just take a moment to actually give you this certificate of recognition for all the work that you've done. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Let me also recognize our
Thank you.
Let me also recognize our treasurer. I know you all have had the benefit of her being here and sharing with you all, and I certainly have had the benefit of working with her in Annapolis for a number of years. Madam Treasurer, would you please stand again? I'm sure you've been recognized. I think I met most of you all when I was in the Senate of Maryland, And I'm sure most of you all are familiar with Senate Bill 606. I was very new, as many of you all know, to the Senate of Maryland. But what I did learn very quickly was that we had a $40 billion investment portfolio. And I had a group of African-American entrepreneurs who were in the investment business who came to me to make note that we had very few African-American people investing our funds. And so I took that very seriously because the state of Maryland happens to be 1/3 African-American. And I'm not sure what the percentage of investment in that portfolio, and I'll never forget when we finally passed the bill and somebody said, the bill says diversify your pension portfolio. That's your $40 billion, of which at that time, $300 million was being shared with African Americans and other minorities across the state. And so someone asked me, what did diversity mean? I said, well, there are two ways you can do it. You can do it by virtue of the population, where 1/3 of the population of the state of Maryland is African American, or you can do it by virtue of whose funds are there anyway. And when you think about that, it could be 1/3 or more of that pool of money was put there by African Americans with the assurance or the hope that we would invest in things that would be beneficial to our community, but more importantly, that you would solidify our investment in our pension portfolio to such a way that we would feel comfortable that when those of you who decide to retire, because I never will, that you have something to retire with. And so that was probably 8 or 9 years ago. And I think we have what now, Madam Treasurer, at least $4 billion, $5 billion at least being invested or shared with African Americans and other minorities to invest on our behalf. Now, that by no means, in my opinion, is enough, but it certainly is a start. And we ought to continue to do that. One of the things that I thought it was important to do, I became the mayor, as Joan said, in 2016, was to look at where we are in our own city. You know, where are we in terms of how we're investing, who's investing? And I think one of the first things I did was to say to my board of directors, it was very important that we create a position of Chief Investment Officer. Can you please stand up? Let's give our Chief Investment Officer a big round of applause. Mr. Elliott, thank you. And let me just tell you why, and I'm sure most of you already in this room know, that oftentimes, you know, we have people who think they're investment officers, carry titles, but this is a serious business. And it requires people who have certain qualification in order to really do it to the extent that we reap the benefits that those folks who trusted you with their money expect to reach. And so we believe that we're headed in the right direction. But here's my other message for you all. It is really important that we remember how diversity impacts and influences the way we do business, and why it's important to be inclusive and diverse. I tell folks it's just like a good soup. The more in the mix, the better the taste. But when you think about it, if you don't have the diversity of individuals investing your money or who are engaged on your investment teams, you don't get the impact or the influence or the ideas or the concerns or the opportunities that benefit the entire communities. And oftentimes when we think about the African American community specifically, we're so underinvested. You know, there are not enough of us investing in those, that are investment bankers in those portfolios, but there are also not enough of us who are decision makers in terms of making the decision who is going to invest the money. And oftentimes I tell folks we get real comfortable, we get in the room and we forget that we are in the room to express that opinion. Oftentimes we get in the room and we get so comfortable that we're the only one in the room, we forget our goals and our objectives. Because if we're not advocating on behalf of our communities, then don't expect other people around the table to do so. I tell people it's your responsibility. You know, when you're sitting at the table, you're at the table, you're invited to the table because you're supposed to express the diversity of the opinions that would not take place if you were not there. So I hope you all keep that in mind. The other thing that I want to share with you all as a member of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, I want you to be very conscious of what's taking place in our economy. You know, we want investment teams, we want investment portfolios to look at where are you investing our dollars. I know you hear now what New York is looking at fossil fuels and taking out $5 billion of their investments, pulling it out of fossil fuels because they believe that it impacts climate change. But those are some of the considerations that you have to consider. The other thing that you must consider, for example, in Baltimore, and I'm going to put it out here because I need you all to take a look at it. You know, we are creating our own investment pool because urban cities across this nation have been underinvested in for decades. And they create real opportunity for investment, real estate investment. I don't know who's, okay. Real estate investment. For example, in Baltimore City, we're creating a $55 million investment pool. And folks ask me, why would we do that? Well, and how can we do that? When I came into office, there was a conversation around selling the garages of our city and building recreation centers. Now, I don't know what kind of return you all can get on a recreation center. I mean, we can in terms of the person, but in terms of the real dollars, that's another conversation to be had. I believe that it was the responsibility of the state to create those kinds of venues and to provide that kind of revenue for us to build and expand recreation centers. And I can tell you that as a state senator, one of the things that we were able to bring back before I left Annapolis was $1 billion. $1 billion to build new schools in Baltimore City, community schools that included recreation centers. And so we are on track in Baltimore City to build more new schools than the entire state of Maryland. We will build 28 new schools. We brought back another $29 million to invest and expand our recreation centers. So selling garages and building recreation centers to me was not an option for the city. So I said, first of all, garages are assets. So why would we sell them? It didn't make sense to me. And somebody said to me, well, the reason you'll sell them is because we won't be driving cars. I said, well, good luck. We'll be driving cars in my lifetime. But and even if we get to driverless cars and everybody takes Lyft or whatever, they got to all park somewhere. But my point was this. It's an asset. Whether you tear it down and build additional real estate or whatever you do, it is an asset that belongs to the city. And oftentimes what you'll hear that cities have done across this nation, I remember when Baltimore, I don't really remember, but I did hear that Baltimore used to own its airport. It was called Friendship Airport back in the day. Today it is the BWI Airport. It belongs to the state. Can you imagine the revenue that Baltimore City would be generating if it still owned its airport? Ask Atlanta about that. And so Mayor Pugh's not selling off assets. Leasing assets are another opportunity. And so we will lease our garages. We will net anywhere between 55 and 80 million. We estimate it'll be about $55 million. We will take that $55 million and work with the private sector to look at how we invest in neighborhoods that have been underinvested in decades. And what happens is, for example, in an area that's been devastated for decades, we now own about 600, we've cleared about 600 acres. We're tearing down, we were able to get $79 million from the state to tear down board-up houses in our city. And when I was first confronted with the issue around how many houses we would tear down, I was told that we were going to tear down 400 boarded-up houses a year. Well, I did the math. I said, well, that'll be about 40 years before we get all the houses down that are boarded up in our city. And as I said to our housing director at the time, I said, we have to do better than that. Because it's not that we're not tearing down boarded houses in our city. We're going too slow. So our goal is to tear down 4,000 a year or rehab them. 4,000 a year or rehab them. So we have 16,000. So in the next 4 to 5 years, we ought to be able to rebuild the real estate in our city. And here's what's already happening. Companies like Ryland Homes and others are now looking at Baltimore to rebuild neighborhoods and communities. We will build at least 300 brand new homes in the Park Heights area. We're now going over into neighborhoods and communities again that have been underinvested in. There is a lot of low-hanging fruit, but I'm telling you, Baltimore is indicative of cities around this nation. And so I ask you all, as you look to invest in communities and neighborhoods, that you look in your own cities, because cities are where people are going to be moving to. The data shows it. They're moving back as fast as they can. As my communications person always says, he says, I say millenniums, but it's millennials. They get it. They get it. Forbes magazine, for example, said Baltimore is one of the 8th fastest growing downtowns in the country. New York Times magazine said we're one of 52 cities in the world, not in the country, not in the state, in the world, that you shouldn't miss in terms of visiting. I know you all are having a great time in our city. And if you're not, I need you to leave here, go outside and spend some money. There are some, you all have major decisions to make. And what we want you to do is think about the diversity of your communities, the diversification of your funds, the opportunity to make a difference, to make a change, and to push our city, our state, and our country forward. It is how you look at our assets. You know, we trust you with our pension funds. We trust you to make decisions that are going to be in the best interest of all of us. But we also trust you to open up your minds and look at the opportunities that exist. So I just want to say to you, I told him, I said, I'm not going to talk long because people's food might get cold. But I really want to say how much I appreciate this organization. I appreciate the diversity of the organization, and I appreciate the conversations that take place here. And so I hope that those conversations spread outside these rooms. And more importantly, as folks who sit on pension fund portfolios and have the responsibility to make sure that you act in the best interest of those that you serve, remember to be inclusive, to be diverse, and more importantly, to care about the communities in our city, our state, and our country. Thank you so much.